Hello everyone, myself Priya Shenoy, Assistant Professor, Department of Information Technology, Changu Kana Thakur Arts, Commerce and Science College, New Panvel. Today we will be studying the topic Validation Controls in ASP.NET. Basically, validation controls are used to ensure that the user input is reliable, and validation mechanisms will be used to enhance application security as well as the user experience. Now, why validation controls are generally used? First of all, it ensures the integrity of the data so that invalid data will not reach up to the application logic. Thereby, consistent data will be maintained by your application. Secondly, the user experience will be improved because the user will get immediate feedback and appropriate guidance on the input requirements. Next, the errors that are occurring at runtime can be prevented, bad input can be avoided, and thereby more stable applications can be created. Last reason we can consider is security foundation, where we can build robust, secure, and maintainable applications if we are using the validation controls. Now, if we are using Visual Studio, then in Visual Studio IDE, certain validation controls are provided to the user. So, which are the validation controls? See, first of all, we have required field validator. It is used if we want that a particular field should not be left empty by the user. Then range validator, if we want the user to enter the values in a particular range only, then range validator is used. Then if we want the input in a specific format, then regular expression validator is used. For example, in case of email addresses or for phone numbers where they must be of a particular format, we can use regular expression validator. Then if we want to compare two values, or if we want to compare the user entered value against some constant value, then in that case compare validator can be used. For example, if you want the password and confirm password entered by the user to be same, then we can use compare validator. Then next, apart from these, we can use custom validator, where we can create our own validation code to check the user input. Finally, to validate all the user entered data on one form, we can use validation summary control, which, as the name itself indicates, will display the validation summary of all the user input controls on that particular form. Now, there are certain properties that are common to all these validator controls. The very important property is control to validate. This property must be set to name of the input control from which the value is to be validated, from which the value is to be checked. Then error message, if the user enters incorrect input, invalid input, then the error message will be displayed in the validation summary control. Then next is text property. If your validation fails, then in that case the value that you have given to the text property will be displayed immediately next to the control. Then enabled, it is a boolean property which can be set to either true or false. If it is set to false, then temporarily the validation will not be performed by the corresponding validator control. Last common property is valid. Now, is valid is a read-only property. If it is set to true, then the control's value is valid, and it is false otherwise. Now, all these validator controls can be used on client side as well as for server side validation. There are certain limitations as well as advantages of both. If we are using client side validation, then in that case immediate feedback can be given to the users, the load on the server can be minimized, then as the data is not passing through the network, user will get instant response. And finally, the limitation is your client side validation can be bypassed by the malicious users. So generally it is recommended that if we want secure validation to be done for our application, then we have to focus on doing server side validation, because in server side validation, integrity and data security is ensured. Malicious attempts by the hackers can be minimized. Validation checkpoints are used before processing, and the only limitation is every time the data have to pass all up to the server from the client, so it may take more time as well as it may increase the load on the server. Which are the best practices that are to be used for validation control? See, the error messages that you are giving must be clear so that the user will exactly get to know what he is missing or what correct input he is expected to enter. Then next, for one particular control, you have to use multiple validators. Means, for example, for a particular field, you can use required field validator as well as regular expression validator, which will ensure that the data is not empty as well as it is in a proper format. Then next, instead of displaying the validation message beside each control, it is useful if we use centralized display by using validation summary control. Then next, the related validators must be grouped together by using the validation groups. And finally, before you launch your particular website, thorough testing must be done to see whether all the validator controls are working as expected. Let's consider an example. For example, we are having a product entry form which are having product name, price, email and price confirmation. So in this case, for product name, we can use required field validator, which will ensure that the value is not empty. Then for price validation, we can use range validator, which will ensure that the price that the user have entered is in a particular range only. Now for email, we can use regular expression validator and the validation expression can be provided. For price confirmation, as we want it to be same as the price the user have entered initially, here we can use compare validator and check whether both the values are same. Finally, we can use error summary. We can display error summary by using the validation summary control. That's it. Thank you.